All right, folks, ready for another deep dive.
Let's do it.
This time, we're tackling a king who needs no introduction.
Uh-huh.
But we're going to give him one anyway.
Right, because there's always more to the story.
Henry VIII, 6 wives, beheaded a couple of them, broke from the church. It's like Tudor Dynasty greatest hits.
It's definitely the image that lasts, isn't it?
But we're going beyond the pop culture version. We want to look at the whole arc of Henry's life, from his unexpected rise to power to the religious turmoil he unleashed. And yeah, we'll even uncover how some of those wives were major players in their own right. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. Let's dive in.
So rewind with me for a sec. Henry wasn't even meant to be king, was he? His brother was supposed to take the throne.
Yeah, his older brother Arthur. And that meant Henry had a totally different upbringing, one geared toward a life outside the spotlight. Think top-notch humanist education, the height of fashion at the time.
So instead of kingship boot camp, he's off reading Plato and, practicing his jousting?
Pretty much. Sources paint him as this intelligent, athletic, even charming young man. Makes you wonder how different things would have been if Arthur had lived and Henry had stayed a prince.
But fate, as they say.
Fate had other plans.
Exactly. Arthur dies, and suddenly Henry's thrust into this role he was never prepared for. And to make matters even more intense, this is a time when a male heir was everything.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure on Henry from day one must have been immense. This wasn't just about continuing the family line, it was about projecting strength, stability. England, without a clear male heir, was vulnerable to all sorts of chaos, internal and external.
And into this pressure cooker walks Catherine of Aragon, married to Henry for years, but no son and heir. Talk about a ticking clock.
And let's not forget, Catherine wasn't some shrinking violet. She was a devout Catholic, the daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain.
Royalty in her own right.
Exactly. She had her own power base, her own beliefs, and she was not about to be easily brushed aside.
Which brings us to the big one, right? The divorce that basically broke Europe.
It was an earthquake.
And the Pope said, nope, no annulment for you, Henry. Well, he didn't take it well, did he?
He did what any reasonable, rational monarch would do.
Started his own church.
You gotta admire the gumption. But seriously, this was huge GE. It wasn't just a lovesick king throwing a tantrum. Henry was taking on the most powerful institution in the world, saying, England's calling the shots now.
And those ripples, that whole Church of England thing, still going strong today. All because of this personal drama.
It's wild when you think about it that way, right? But let's not forget, in the middle of this whole political and religious hurricane, you've got these 6 very different women, each trying to navigate Henry's court and, well, Henry himself.
And that's what I think gets lost sometimes. It's easy to just see them as names on that rhyme. Divorced, beheaded, died. But they were real people.
Each with their own ambitions, their own strategies.
Some more successful than others, I guess you could say.
Definitely. Take Anne Boleyn. This is a woman who knew what she wanted the crown and was willing to play the long game. Some even argue she was the one pushing Henry towards the break with Rome, seeing it as her path to power.
Bold.
Didn't end well for her in the long run.
No, it really didn't. And then you have Jane Seymour, who finally gives Henry the son he so desperately wanted, but dies tragically soon after.
And Anne of Cleves. Poor Anne of Cleves. That marriage was over almost as quickly as it began.
Yeah. Not even worth putting on the highlight reel.
Then there's Catherine Howard, caught up in a web of scandal and accusations. Didn't end well for her either, I'm afraid.
And finally, Catherine Parr.
Catherine Parr, the survivor, managed to outlive Henry, which, honestly, might be the most impressive feat of all.
Right. Talk about dodging a bullet. Or several.
Indeed. Though it's important to note that as Henry's reign went on, a darkness settled.
Yeah, things definitely take a turn. You start seeing the executions, and it's like this switch flips. Suddenly, Henry's not just a king, he's, well, let's just call it like it is a tyrant.
The execution of Sir Thomas More was a turning point, that's for sure. This was one of Henry's closest advisors, a brilliant mind, and he's executed for refusing to put Henry's authority above the Pope's.
And then, of course, Anne Boleyn. To go from the woman he defied the world to marry.
To being accused of treason, no less.
And beheaded. Chilling.
It makes you wonder what goes on in the mind of a king when that much power becomes so absolute. Were these executions simply acts of cruelty? Or were they calculated power plays? Historians are still debating that.
But it's not just who he executed, it's how he did it. These weren't quiet, private affairs. These were public spectacles.
Imagine being a commoner in that time. You're standing there in the square, forced to watch as someone is brutally put to death. What message does that send?
Don't mess with them.
Precisely. It was a very effective, if brutal, way to maintain control. And it paints a very different picture from those iconic portraits of Henry in his prime, all swagger and finery.
You're talking about the Hans Holbein one, right? The one where he's all puffed up in his royal garb.
That's the one. But here's something most people don't know. By the time that portrait was painted, Henry was in rough shape. He was seriously overweight, riddled with ulcers, probably in constant pain.
So behind that image of power and might
Was a man falling apart.
So we can't end this without talking about how Henry's quest for an heir actually played out.
Right, because, spoiler alert, he did eventually get his son, Edward VI, who inherited the throne. But
There's always a but,
Edward was a sickly child, and sadly, his reign was short-lived.
which sets the stage for
For the drama to continue. With Edward gone, the throne passed to Mary, Catherine of Aragon's daughter.
Talk about a plot twist.
She was as devoutly Catholic as her mother and wasted no time trying to drag England back under the Pope's authority, which, as you can imagine, didn't go over so well with everyone.
Hence the nickname Bloody Mary.
Exactly. And then, to really bring things full circle, Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn, the woman Henry tore the world apart for.
It's like something out of a play, isn't it?
Life is stranger than fiction, as they say. And Elizabeth, despite all the chaos her father unleashed, went on to become one of England's greatest monarchs.
So much to think about. If people take away one thing from this deep dive, what should it be?
That Henry VIII was more than just a king obsessed with an heir. He was a man of contradictions, shaped by the power he craved, the love he pursued, and the betrayals he both committed and endured.
A true product of his time, but one who shaped that time in ways we still feel today.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what if things had gone just a little differently? What if Arthur had lived? If Henry and Catherine had had a son? Would England be the same country it is today?
Stuff to ponder. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time.